Today's daf we're going to be learning is Menachot daf Mem Aleph. We're going to get started. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started from the bottom of Mem Amud Bet with Rabbi Zera. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Mat, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Zera said the name of Rav Mat and the name of Shmuel. Tchelet ein ba mishum kilayim va'afilu b'talit p'tura. If you put tchelet, tzitziot of tchelet, okay, the strings, into a garment, there's no problem of kilayim. Even in a talit that's not liable for tzitzit. Okay, even if it's not, you're not supposed to put tzitzit, and there's no problem of putting linen and wool together. It's a very strange statement. If you're not obligated in tzitzit, then it should be forbidden. Mishum kilayim. You're not right. Only there's a special dispensation or a special heter for tzitzit to have them kilayim, but not if it's not tzitzit. So what does this mean? What are we talking about? What's this talit p'tura? So the Gemara asks, my talit p'tura. We're going to have two options. The first one we'll reject, and then we'll accept the second. If it doesn't have enough, it's not a big enough size to be requiring tzitzit. V'hatanya, can't be, because it says in a braita, talit shakatan mitkasebo, rosho v'rubo. We're going to have two sizes. We'll call them small and extra small. You have a small one, so size small children's, okay? Something that the child can wear. It'll cover the majority of his body and his head. Hagadol yotze by derech harai, and if in a pinch you're stuck, you ended up getting your clothes all dirty and you need a change, and that's all there is, you'll wear it. Okay? Then, and the Rashi even says, Sheino bosh latzei balashuk. It's big, it's big enough for you that it's not a total humiliation to walk like that on the street. That's the determining factor. You're liable for tzitzit. You have to put tzitzit on that beged. If a child does not cover, if the clothing is not big enough to cover the majority of the head and the body of a child, even if the adult once in a while might use it, p'tura, it's exempt from tzitzit. And the same is true for shatnez, which sounds like what they're saying is shatnez, you can wear, okay, you can't wear a garment that's made of wool and linen. That's small, let's call it. But the extra small you could, because just like it's not obligated in tzitzit, also you're not, and this is not for tzitzit clothes, if it's a regular clothing, it's not a problem of shatnez. That's what they think. But then they ask a question. Okay, we're not yet back as to why this isn't a good explanation. It's what this talit p'tura is. There's not enough of a shiur. We're going to get back there soon. So the Gemara says, Vavina ba. Now they asked a question on this braita. Mai v'chein linyan kilayim. What does that mean? And also for kilayim. If you're going to say the same thing that I just suggested, which is v'chein linyan isura de kilayim, and that you're not liable kilayim if it's that extra small size that you wouldn't normally wear in the shuk, even though once in a while you did. Well, if you once in a while go out there and it's so little that it's kind of ridiculous, well, you won't be liable for kilayim. That's just not true. Because it says in the Mishnah in kilayim, ein arai b'kilayim. There's no problem of arai in kilayim. There's no problem of going out. What does it mean, ein arai b'kilayim? Ein arai b'kilayim means there's no dispensation for arai. That means that if anything I wear is going to be a problem, even if I just wear it and it's teeny on me, I've worn kilayim. It's a problem. That's called wearing. So it can't be that saying v'chein linyan kilayim is that split between small and extra small. There won't be an obligation of kilayim. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'chein linyan sadim b'tzitzit. What it's saying is that's the same as this sadim b'tzitzit. You can put a sadim in your tzitzit which is again putting a tzitzit in your sadin. Your sadin is linen. You can put tchelet in only if it's obligated in tzitzit. If it's not obligated in tzitzit, you can't put tchelet in. Okay, well, let's go back. What was our line? Tchelet ein bo mishum kilayim afilu b'talit p'tura. It sounds like you could put a string of tchelet in kilayim even if it's exempt from tzitzit. Well, that certainly can't be if it's too small, because we just learned that if it's too small, you actually can't put the kilayim, you can't create a beged of kilayim. So it must be something else. Elamai p'tura hitil lemutelet. What Rabbi Zera is saying is, if you put a tchelet thread in a linen garment, because remember tchelet is wool, you put it in a linen garment and it already had tzitzit there and it had enough strands, and you put an extra one, then it's not a problem of kilayim because it already, right, is tzitzit. And we already learned what Rabbi Zera said, that if you put that extra strand in, right, you could actually use it as your tzitzit, even though, right, at that moment it's not really making it for the purpose of tzitzit. But if one of them tears or you cut one of them, that one becomes, right, and it's not a problem of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, right, that it's already was there. No, because you really, that works. So what do you see here? It's the same kind of idea here. Okay, it's not exactly the same, but it's saying you can actually create a shatnez, right? It's already shatnez anyway, but you can add another one that's a mix of mixing the breeds when it's because theoretically it could be used as tzitzit if one of them were to tear or be broke or be cut. So now the Gemara says, wait, we just talked about this on the previous daf, and in fact, it was Rabbi Zera who said it. So Rabbi Zera Chadazimni, he just said it's not a problem with Tasem and Asui. You can add this extra string of tchelet, and it's the same idea, really. Well, you can add the extra string. It's not and can count as your tzitzit, which means also that we're not worried about shatnez. Same idea. So they say chad, right, and then why would Rabbi Zera say the same thing twice? To which they answer chad michal de chaver te'itmar. What really they were saying is one was derived from the other. He really only said one. And there's machlok at Rashi and Tosfot, interestingly enough, which one was said first and which one was derived from it. Okay, Rashi says that actually the first one we saw, from there you can derive, if you could do it for tzitzit, then it's obviously not a problem of kilayim. Because anything that's obligated, right, that could function as tzitzit, then you don't have to worry about the kilayim. Anyway, that's Rashi. Tosfot differs. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Talit kfula chayevet b'tzitzit. Okay, what's a talit kfula? This is you have a very long, I'm just going to use paper as an example. You have a very long garment. Okay, it's extra long, like not the size of a regular tzitzit garment, has 4 corners, and then you fold it over, okay, to make it shorter. Now, when you fold it over, I want you to notice, now it's not clear whether you originally had the tzitzit on the 4 corners, but whether you did or didn't, it's not necessarily so important. When you fold it over, now you have a problem. Either, first of all, you might have 4 tzitziot already at the bottom, but they're all at the bottom now, right? Or at one side. When you fold it over, you've now created 2 new corners. So now the question is, so again, it could be you had no tzitzit at all yet. And what it's saying is when you fold over this garment, are you obligated to put tzitzit on all 4 corners now? On the folded corner, basically. That's the question. So talit fula chayevet b'tzitzit. According to Tanna Kama, you have to put tzitzit on, and in the new corners. Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon exempts. Okay, some people say that Rabbi Shimon exempts. There's a debate here. What exactly is going on? Some people think that this is just not a normal beged, and therefore it's not chayav in tzitzit because it's just not a beged that anybody usually wears. But anyway, it could be just because he says this isn't really the place where you put the tzitzit. Okay, we're going to learn a little more about this. Vishavin, now they all agree though. She'im kafla. The problem, I'll just point out, the problem with Rabbi Shimon, if you fold it over, but then you unfold it, right? Because it unfolds pretty easily. The tzitzit are in the middle of the garment. We're going to see a story with this soon. So now they say, Vishavin she'im kfala utfara shechayevet. But they both agree that if you sewed it down, then it would be like a new garment. And then it would have 4 corners, and you would have obviously put the tzitzit there because we're not worried about it opening up because it's all sewn down. So the Gemara says, Tfara, if you sewed it, pshita, isn't that obvious? They say, lo tzricha dinakta b'sikeh. What they mean is, even if you pinned it, just by pinning it already, that obligates you in the tzitzit. Rabbi Bar Huna ikla be Rabbi Bar Rav Nachman. So Rabbi Bar Huna came to Rabbi Bar Nachman's house, or his Beit Midrash, or it's not clear. Chazi davi mikasi talit kfula urami lechuti lavei kfela. So he saw he was wearing this talit, folded talit, and he put on its strings on the folded part. If shetava atachute v'kam lahadereshi. Now then he opened up the talit, and the tzitzit ended up on his head. Right? What does it mean on his head? Well, if you assume, right, there's a talit. So now the tzitzit are in the middle, but when they're on the corners, but then when you open it, they're right in the middle. And when you're wearing this as a talit around your head, let's just say we really mean like a talit. So the tzitzit are like in the back of your head, and they came like over his head, and it was ridiculous. And he said, but not only did it look ridiculous, but he says to him, not only that, and presumably here, he hadn't put tzitzit on all 4 corners in the beginning. Only once he folded it, he then put on all 4 corners. So now what's the problem? He's missing on the corners of the garment. So he says to him, Ata shadye ikase glima achrit. Sorry, he says to him, Amar lehu, lav hainu kanaf, the katavachmana baraita. That's not the corner the Torah was talking about. So he quickly runs, Rav Bar Nachman, and he goes and he gets a different garment. To which Rabba Barhuna says to him, Amar Leim, Yisafar Chovat Gavrahu. I didn't. What do you think? It's tzitzit is an obligation on the person. You have to be wearing tzitzit. Chovat talitu. It's an obligation on the garment. Meaning, number one, why'd you go run and put on tzitzit? You don't have to wear tzitzit. But number two, he said, you now have a garment that doesn't have tzitzit on it. You have to deal with it. Zil ramila, go put tzitzit on it. So now they're going to say, Lema Masayale. Let's support this statement where he says it's chova on the talit and not on the person. Chasidim Arishonim, kevan she'argu b'shalosh, as soon as when they were weaving their garments, when they got to 3 fingers breadths away from the end of finishing the beged, hayu matilim batchelet, they would already put the tzitzit in, because they said this is almost a garment, and the garment is required to have tzitzit on it. Right? They obviously weren't going to wear it at that point. I say, no, that doesn't provide support, because Shani Chasidim de Machamre Anafshayu. Chasidim are usually people who are very pious, and they do extra stringencies. That doesn't prove anything. Upliga, okay, so first we try to bring a support, now we say, actually, pliga, this comment that he made about it being chovat talit, goes against the malacha, the angel. An angel who saw in a halachic argument with an angel. Well, we're going to see one right now. An angel came to Rav Katina and said to him, he was wearing a sadim. Now here we mean a sadim that only had 2 corners. Okay, it's more like our clothes. They don't have 4 corners. Amarle, Katina, sadina b'kayata v'sar b'la b'sitva. Katina, he says to him, are you going to wear a sadim in the summer and a cloak a coat in the winter, and you never... You're never going to end up wearing tzitzit because you keep wearing these clothes that are exempt from tzitzit and you'll never fulfill the mitzvah. Amarle, anshitu ase. So Rav Katina says to him, are you punishing me for not doing a mitzvah ase? Never heard of such a thing. Amarle, bizman di'ikaritcha anshinan. He said, when there's anger of God, the wrath of God is out there, people get punished for not doing positive commandments. And you're not doing a positive commandment. Now, let's try to understand what the malach was saying. If you say it's an obligation on the person, obviously that's why he's obligated, because he didn't put it on. But he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. But if you say it's just an obligation on the talit, he was wearing a talit, right? He was wearing a garment that wasn't obligated in tzitzit. So what's the problem? So what do you see here? This malach obviously thought it was a chova on the gavra. Now the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. I don't understand. Elamai, chovat gavrahu? You're going to say it's a chovat gavra, and that's why the malach said he wasn't fulfilling his mitzvah. Nihida chayve rachmana, kimakase talita bat chiyuva. Now it's a chovat on the gavra if you're wearing a garment that's obligated in tzitzit. But kimakase talita la bat chiyuva. But if you're wearing a garment that's not obligated in tzitzit, michayve rachmana, the Torah didn't obligate you to do it. So how could that be? To which we answer, Elahachi Karmalei. This is what the angel was saying. You're just trying to surreptitiously, you're trying to, on purpose, not wear clothes that are chayav in tzitzit to avoid the mitzvah. You're doing an intentional act trying to avoid fulfilling a mitzvah. That's what the angel was upset about. Okay, but you see here that he did think it was an obligation on the individual, and not against what Rabbi Barhuna said, which is it's an obligation on the talit itself, on the garment. Amar Rav Tuvi Bar Kisna Amar Shmuel. If you have clothing in a box, it's obligated in tzitzit. If you make for an elderly person burial shrouds to be prepared for them, well then, even though it's in your closet, you actually don't have to put the tzitzit on. Why? Because the Torah said, on your 4 corners of your garment, asher techaseba, for your garment that you're planning to cover yourself with. And this person's not planning to cover themselves until they're no longer obligated in the mitzvah. Bahai, lavli kasuya avida. This garment wasn't meant for covering a person in their lifetime. So therefore you actually don't have to put it on while it's in your closet. But other garments you actually do. If you have, again, 4-corner garments. But they add, but at the time of death, clearly you put on the tzitziot, mishum lo'eg larash cheref oseh, because it's not appropriate to mock poor people. What does this mean? First of all, there's a different halacha about this, and then we'll talk about this one, that you shouldn't go into a cemetery wearing tzitzit because it's mocking the people who can't actually fulfill the mitzvah. But there's another halacha that's what this is saying is we actually prepare burial shrouds. The burial shrouds we put on a dead person, we make sure there's tzitzit on them when we bury them, because otherwise it's like mocking them. Oh, here you have a four-corner garment, and we're not going to put tzitzit on it because you can't do the mitzvah anyway, and that's mocking them. Okay, in general, an interesting question, what it means to mock a dead person when they're dead, but there's this concept of respect for the dead. So now I just want to talk about an interesting machloket. The Shulchan Aruch paskins here, ein kovrin tamed ela b'talit sheyesh bo tzitzit, just like it says here. They bury people with shrouds with tzitzit. Okay, most places don't do this anymore. The Rama adds, v'yesh omrim de'ein tzarich tzitzit. Some people say you don't need tzitzit. V'nehagu lekavro b'tzitzit, ach sheposlim tchila tzitzit or kochim echav haknafot. But halacha l'maaseh, the Rama says we actually ruin the tzitzit. We make sure that it's disqualified tzitzit. We don't actually put on real tzitzit. And even more interestingly, okay, if we talk about how halacha evolves, we don't even do like the Shulchan Aruch or the Rama in Israel. Okay, in Chutz La'aretz, or at least in America, I know the custom is generally yes to bury men in burial shrouds with tzitzit, but custom in Israel is not to bury with tzitzit. So that you can see how halacha changes, and that's a question how we got to that. But I'm going to leave it at that right now. Amar Rachba, Amar Rav Yehuda, talit shenikra'a. If it tore, chutz the shalosh yitfol, you can sew it if it's not three fingers breadths away from the edge. But okay, we don't yet know what the issue is. Toch shalosh lo yitfor, but within three from the end you can't sew, because the concern is you're going to leave strings there, and then you're going to use that for your tzitzit, and you can't do that because you have to put the tzitzit on and not just have them hanging there with the threads that were from fixing the garment. Tanya Namihachi, there's a brighter that support it that says talit shenikra'a chutz l'shalosh yitfor toch shalosh. If it's within three though, Rabbi Meir Omer lo yitfor, Chachamim Omer yitfor. Okay, the Chachamim aren't really concerned about this, and they allow you to do it anyway. Okay. No. Chutz, right. Toch shalosh from the edge. Rabbi Meir says no, but the rabbis actually permit. Vishavim. Now they all agree that what? Okay, he's not worried that you're going to turn it into your tzitzit. They both agree, though, shelo yavi afilu ama alama mimakom acher ubat chelet v'toleba. You can't bring a piece of cloth, even 1 cubit by 1 cubit, which is pretty big, that has tzitzit already on it, and sew it onto this beged with a torn corner, and use that as your tzitzit, because that's again a problem of taseh v'lo menasui. You have to make it and not from something that was already made. You have to actually strand the tzitzit on the beged and not take it from something that was already there. Bishavim, they also both agree, shemivi tchelet mimakom acher v'toleba. You could take tzitzit from another place and put it on this beged, okay, as long as it's not torn. Okay, some people explain mufseket in some other way, but we'll go with torn. Shmat me now, wait a minute. Can you infer from here, mitirim mi beged lebeged, and we're going to get off on this topic. Can you take a thread that's being used for tzitzit on one garment and move it to another garment? Now, this happens to be a big machloket, so they're saying, oh, well, it sounds from here like you can't. But that seems weird because there's a big machloket about it. So they say, Dilma de Ibalai. Now, what they must mean is, we'll talk in a minute about what this is, Mitirim Beged Lebeged, and what the issue is, but the issue is that the garment was already ruined. So that's why he took the tzitzit off and reused them. That's okay. But if it's being used on a garment and fulfilling its mitzvah, you can't just move it to another one because that's disgrace to the mitzvah, or at least according to some, which we're going to see the machloket Rabban Shmuel soon. Tanu Rabbanan. So now they're quoting a braita. Talit shekula tchelet. If you have a garment that's all tchelet, if you have a white garment, you're supposed to put, remember, tchelet tzitzit, and you're supposed to have 2 threads that are tchelet and 2 that are white, because you're supposed to have it like this, like the corner, the same color as the cloth itself. So if you have a talit that's all tchelet, what do? So here we're going to have to do the reverse. We're going to have 2 tchelet, which is the same color as the garment, and now you need to fill in with 2 other colors. What colors can you use? You can have any colors you want, other than chutz mikala ilan, other than indigo, because indigo looks like tchelet, and it's not really tchelet. So, and also the issue here is it looks like tchelet. We need a contrast color. Meitive. But wait, there's a contradiction. This says you can't put kala ilan at all. But in this source, we're going to see, well, if you did, it's okay. But first, we're going to read parts of the source which sound just like we just read. Talit ein poter ba'ela mina. Okay, the talit, you have to have its own type. This is talking about, like, let's say a white garment. You need white tzitzit there. Um, and talit shekulat tchelet, mevi tchelet v'davar acher v'tolaba. If it's all tchelet, then you bring tchelet and something else and put it on. Obviously, if it's not tchelet, you bring tchelet and the same color as the garment. V'kala ilan lo yavi, and don't use this indigo color. V'imevi kasher, but if you did, it's okay. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lo kasher. Kam b'talit bat arba'a chutin, kam b'talit bat shmona chutin. He says, no, it's not a problem. There's a difference between a talit with 4 chutim in it and a talit with 8 chutim. Why? In 4, okay, you shouldn't use kalilan, but you used it, it's okay. But in 8, if you use kalilan, people are going to confuse the kalilan and the tchelet. They're going to see extra strands. They're going to say, oh, we could take out of here and use it somewhere else. And then they'll actually accidentally use kalilan thinking that it's tchelet. Now they say, Shmat mina mitilim mibeged lebeged. Sounds like you can take out from one tzitzit to the other. And we learned you can't do that. Or at least there's a machloket. So they say, Dilma di avad. What they mean is, if you happen to do it, then, in other words, we're worried that someone might actually do it even though they're not really supposed to do that. Okay? And therefore, that's just an aside that got us to, in other words, we were bringing this contradiction, but it got us also to the beged lebeged issue. Now we're going to see it straight on. Itmar. Rav Amar emetirim mibeged lebeged, u'Shmuel Amar metirim mibeged lebeged. So Rav says you can't take out of one beged and put it in another, and Shmuel says you can. It's fine to take tzitzit from one and put it in another. So Shmuel doesn't seem to have a problem with this. Rav Amar, another similar machloket, ema lekimi ner l'ner. You can't light from one candle to the other. U'Shmuel Amar, we're talking about ner Chanukah. Shmuel Amar madlikim ner l'ner. Okay, now there's a big debate when Rav says you can't light from ner to ner. Some people think he means to light a match from one candle and move it to the other, because if it's the exact same mitzvah and you're not really taking away from the first, it seems like it would be okay. Okay, and I'm going to show you how we paskin like this in the second. I'm just going to open it in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Taf Ayin Resh Dalet. It says you're allowed to madlik v'ner l'ner, madlikim ner Chanukah miner Chanukah. You can light from one to the other. V'dafka la'alik zem mizeh below emtzait. Okay, without it passing through some intermediary, right, like a match. Or if you use a different candle and light from one to the other, that's a problem, because you're basically lighting something that's chol from something that's kodesh. Some people understand Shmuel is saying that's totally fine, because if you say that's their machloket, then Shmuel's saying it's fine, and we paskin like Shmuel. You'll see soon why we paskin like Shmuel. But they say, unless you're worried that Yerbeh ner shel before you light the other candle, if you're worried it's going to go out, then it's a problem. Anyway, the Rama writes, and that's what we do. This is why we use the shamash, right? The shamash, we usually think it's because you're not allowed to benefit from the candles, so you have to have a shamash there. But why do you have to light from the shamash? Because you could use the candles to light from one to the other, theoretically. It's not ruining the mitzvah at all. But the Rama says you really shouldn't do it, even though madlikimi ner l'ner. He says, why not? Because he claims that ikar mitzvato eno ela ner echad. Because really ner Chanukah, you're just supposed to do one candle. It's a mehadrin and mehadrin to add. So then you're really lighting from one mitzvah, from the first one to the others, which aren't really the same level mitzvah. So he says it's actually a problem for that reason. In any case, this is what we do, right? We use the shamash to light. We don't light from each other. Okay. It's just always fun to see, what we do in the Gemara. So now we're going to have another machlok at Rav and Shmuel. Rav Amar ein halakha ke Rabbi Shimon b'greira. U'Shmuel Amar halakha ke Rabbi Shimon b'greira. So Rav says we don't hold like Rabbi Shimon and greira, and Shmuel says we do. What's greira? A big halacha in Hilchot Shabbat. You might remember machlok at Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda about davar she'eno mitkaven. If you're trying to pull, you're pulling something on the ground, and it makes a ditch, which is digging a ditch, which is forbidden on Shabbat because of cholesh. It's like plowing. But you didn't really mean to do that. You were really trying to schlep your chair down the road. So, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's totally fine. And Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Shimon. But Rav doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon. He doesn't think it's permitted. Amar Abai, kol mile demar avi kirav. All these ways, Rabba was his adoptive father and his rabbi, did like Rav. Other than levar mehanet tlat avi Shmuel. Other than these three, where he held like Shmuel. Okay, the madlikim ner l'ner. Madikim, mitirimi beged lebeged. You can untie your tzitzit, move them to another beged, and halacha like Rabbi Shimon and Greira. They're all leniencies. So again, the Gemara says "Mitirim mibegel lebegel madikim in yerliner v'halacha k'Rabbi Shimon b'Greira." Tanya, and now we're just going to see the brighter that says Rabbi Shimon's position. Rabbi Shimon Omer gorer adam mitak yisei v'safsal. You could drag a chair, a bed, a chair, or a bench. Ubavad shelo yitkaven lasot charitz, as long as you didn't mean to create a ditch. Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're going to see 3 things that people did when it came to laundering tzitzit. Okay, you ever laundered tzitzit? It's always a problem. The strings are going to get tangled. They might rip. Okay, and we're going to see there was a 3rd problem that Rabbi Yehuda was concerned about, or wasn't concerned about, but the Gemara almost thought maybe he should have been. I don't know. But Rabbi Yehuda Masr Leila Katzara, he would give his tzitziot to the launderer. And they say, what was the thing? Well, he wasn't worried that he might take out the tchelet, because it was very expensive, and swap it with kala ilan, but he trusted the launderer and was willing to give his stuff to the launderer. Rav Chanina Avid Leisisa. And so what did he do? Rashi explains, when he would give it to the koves, what would he do? This wasn't because of the kala ilan, this was because of them tearing. He would roll the strands into a ball. Okay, so it would be like basically taut, and you wouldn't have to worry about it ripping. And Ravina Chayat Lemechat, he would sew in a little pouch every time before he would take it to the laundry. Sew in a few stitches, stick all the strands into the strings, into the stitches, into the like a little pocket, and then stitch it up, and then he wouldn't have to worry about it getting ruined. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Kama Chutim Unotein. Now we get to the real thing, which is how many strands do you need? Machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, and interestingly enough, we paskin like Beit Shammai, which we're going to see today. Beit Shammai Omrim Arba, he says 4, and then you fold them over, and that's why you end up with 8. Beit Hillel Omrim Shlosha, they say 3, which is really ends up being 6. V'kamatei meshuleshet, how long should it be after you do all the knots? How much is supposed to be hanging down? Beit Shammai Omrim Arba, Beit Hillel Omrim Shalosh. Beit Shammai said 4 breadths, and finger breadths, and Beit Hillel, right, finger widths basically, and Beit Hillel says 3. V'shalosh Beit Hillel omrim echat me'arba b'tefach shel kol adam. The 3 that they said is one of the 4 of a tefach. In other words, a finger, like a tefach, is 4 fingers, so one of those fingers. Now, why is he saying this? Well, Amar Rav Papa, tefach deoraita, the Torah tefach is arba bigudal, so it's 4 if it's a thumb. So that's what he means by the width of the thumb. Seems to be saying the width of the thumb, because if it's 4 in your tefach, it's 4 of your thumbs. Shit biktana, if it's your little finger, it's actually 6 of them. And if it's chamesh betilta, if it's your middle finger, then it's 5. 5 middle finger breaths is a tefach. Amar Rafuna, arba'a betoch arba mushuleshet arba. He says it's 4 strands within 4 finger breadths of the edge of the clothing, umishuleshet arba, and 4 finger breadths down to right from the bottom of the knots. The Rav Yehuda says the same thing, but 3. Shlosha b'toch shalosh mishuleshet shalosh. It's 3 strings within 3 of the edge, 3 fingers breadths, and mishuleshet 3, it goes down 3 finger breadths from the bottom of the knots. Amar Papa, he does a kind of mix. Hilchata, the halacha is, and this is where we see paskin like Beit Shammai, arba'a, 4 strands, bitoch shalosh mishuleshet arba, within 3 from the edge, but it goes down 4 at the bottom. L'meimra di'ilu shiura. Now they're going to end today's stuff with a question. Sounds like it has a certain minimum amount. Sounds pretty clear, right, of how long it needs to be. Urimidu, tzitzit, ain't tzitzit ala yotze. The tzitzit have to come out of your garment, but ain't tzitzit ala b'mashu. It just needs to come out a teeny bit. It says no shiur. Ukvar alu ziknei Beit Shammai v'ziknei Beit Hillel aliyat Yochanan ben Betera. They already went. The elders of Beit Shammai Beit Hillel went up into the attic of Yochanan ben Betera and said, "Amru tzitzit ein la shiur." And they also said, "Kayotze bo, like that lulav ein bo shiur." There's no requisite amount for these things. So my lav ein la shiur klal doesn't sound like there's no shiur at all. There's no requisite amount. So how could you be talking about exactly how much it's supposed to be? And with that, we're going to end with our question and finish our daf here. So what do we have today? We have this, we started with the understanding this concept of even a talit p'tula doesn't have kilayim. In the end, we figured out that it must be if you added extra strings. From there, we went to the talit kfula, and we discussed that whole issue with the strings are going to end up in the middle if you open it. and in which cases did there machlok, and in which cases did they agree, right? If you pin it together, then it's already a different story. We had the whole, is it a chova on the person or on the beged? And we saw the whole angel versus Rabba Barhuna, right? And in terms of, is it for the person, which the angel thought, against Rabba Barhuna, who thought it was really on the beged. From there, we got to Tachrichin, closed shrouds for burial shrouds, and whether we put tzitzit on them or not. Then we got to the talit, right, about sewing it, and it's a problem sewing it because you might leave strings near the edge, so sewing it near the edge is a problem. We talked about the about mitirimi beged lebeged. We got into those machlokot between Rav and Shmuel, and then we got into the laundering habits of the tzitzit, and the final with how many strands, how long do they have to be, how close to the edge do they need to be, and we finished with a big question. I thought there's no shiur for tzitzit, so how are we going to explain that? With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and a Shabbat Shalom.